Princess Nira stood at the edge of the grand hall, her small hands clutching the folds of her flowing gown. The hall was enormous, with ceilings that seemed to touch the sky and walls that shimmered like liquid silver under the light of the tall crystal chandeliers. Everywhere she looked, there were aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some had scales that reflected the colors of the rainbow. Some had feathers that shimmered in the soft light. Others had long, thin limbs that moved with a strange elegance. But despite all the beauty and the grandeur, Nira felt invisible. She had always known that being a princess came with rules. People expected her to smile when they approached, to nod politely when they spoke, and to appear confident even when her heart raced with anxiety. She had been taught to walk gracefully, to speak clearly, and to always keep her thoughts hidden unless someone of great importance asked her opinion. Yet today, as the hall filled with important guests, she felt more alone than ever. Diplomats from faraway planets walked past her, speaking in languages she barely understood. They laughed, they gestured, and they made plans, but none of them looked at her. They did not notice the nervous flutter in her chest or the way her hands trembled slightly as she tried to stand still. For all her royal training, Princess Nira felt small and unimportant. "Your Highness, you must present the gift," one of her attendants whispered, bowing low. Nira's eyes dropped to the small box she held. Inside was a delicate crystal sculpture that represented peace between her people and the visitors from other worlds. She tried to remember the words she was supposed to say. She had practiced them many times in private, standing before the mirrors of her chamber, but now her mind felt empty. As the ceremony began, the crowd's attention turned to the stage. Nira's parents, King Toran and Queen Celia, stood proudly, their forms tall and commanding. The king's deep voice echoed across the hall as he welcomed the guests. Nira could see the guests nodding and smiling, exchanging gifts and praising the royal family. She wanted to join them, to speak and to be noticed, but every time she took a step forward, her legs felt heavy, and her courage seemed to vanish. From the far corner of the hall, a human watched her quietly. His name was Tom. He was not tall or overly strong, but there was a calm confidence in his eyes. Unlike the aliens around him, he did not shout to be heard or gesture wildly to attract attention. He simply observed with patience and curiosity. Tom had traveled far from Earth, seeking knowledge and experiences in the stars. He had heard about Princess Nira and her shyness. He had come expecting to see a nervous princess, but what he saw surprised him. Nira's quiet presence stood out against the loud and colorful crowd. She did not try to impress anyone. She did not wave her hands dramatically, and she did not speak in the formal tone that many expected. She simply stood, her eyes wide and curious, taking in the scene with careful attention. To Tom, this made her beautiful in a way that no one else in the hall could understand. He noticed the way her hair fell softly across her shoulders, and the faint glow of her skin under the crystal lights. He noticed her hands, delicate and trembling slightly as she held the gift. Most importantly, he noticed the sadness that lingered in her gaze, a sadness that no one else seemed to see. As the ceremony continued, some guests whispered to each other. They talked about politics, alliances, and trade agreements. Others whispered about Nira herself, commenting on her quiet demeanor. Many considered her shy nature a weakness. They did not understand that her shyness came not from fear but from thoughtfulness. Nira had a mind that worked quickly, noticing details others ignored. She could remember the smallest facts about people she met, and she could sense when someone was unhappy or in need. Yet in a hall filled with loud voices and flashing lights, her talents were overlooked. One alien diplomat, tall and with shining blue scales, laughed loudly and called out a greeting to the queen. Nira felt a sudden pang of embarrassment as he turned his gaze toward her. She quickly looked down, hoping he would not notice her. But the alien's eyes lingered, curious and sharp. For a moment, Nira felt the weight of everyone's attention. She wished she could disappear. Seeing this, Tom took a small step closer. He did not move toward her aggressively, nor did he push through the crowd. He simply adjusted his stance so that he could have a clear view of her. In that moment, he silently made a decision. He would not ignore her. He would not see her as a shy, weak princess, but as a person who deserved respect and attention. He did not know how Nira would respond or if she even wanted to be noticed, but he felt that he had to try. Nira, unaware of Tom's attention, continued to watch the ceremony. Her eyes followed the movements of the other guests. Some handed gifts, Some bowed gracefully and some laughed loudly. She noticed how some of the guests ignored each other completely, focusing only on their own ambitions. She sighed quietly, wishing that someone could see her as she was, not as a princess, not as a symbol of royalty, but as Nira, a girl who loved to paint and dream and imagine faraway stars. Her thoughts were interrupted when one of her attendants stepped forward. "Your Highness, it is time to present the gift," the attendant said softly. Nira nodded, her heart racing. She walked slowly to the front of the stage, careful not to trip over her gown. She held the crystal sculpture tightly, wishing that it would somehow speak for her courage. As she reached the stage, she felt the eyes of the crowd on her, but she also felt a strange calm. Somewhere in the hall, Tom watched her quietly, and for the first time Nira felt a small flicker of hope. Perhaps she was not completely invisible. Perhaps someone could see her without fear or judgment. She placed the crystal sculpture on the display table with trembling hands. The audience clapped politely, though most of them were already thinking about the next event. Nira bowed, keeping her eyes lowered, and quickly stepped back. Her face felt hot with embarrassment, but she tried to steady her breathing. Tom took another step forward, closing the distance between them ever so slightly. He did not speak yet. He simply observed, giving her space but letting her know through his presence that she was seen. Nira felt a strange warmth at the back of her neck. She did not understand why, but she felt less alone. The ceremony continued with more speeches, gifts, and introductions. Nira stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her. She noticed that many of the other guests were showing off, trying to outshine each other with stories of their home planets and accomplishments. She did not feel jealous or angry. She simply felt that she did not belong in their world of noise and attention. But then she noticed Tom again. He did not try to impress anyone. He did not raise his voice, and he did not compete for attention. He simply stood calmly, watching, listening, and waiting. Nira could not explain why, but this made her feel safe. It was as if he had silently promised that he would not hurt her, that he would not ignore her, and that he would see her for who she truly was. For the first time that day, Nira allowed herself to breathe. She looked around the hall, noticing the shimmering walls, the glowing chandeliers, and the colorful guests. But her eyes kept returning to Tom. She did not know his name yet, and she did not know why he mattered, but she felt a connection that she had never felt before. The ceremony finally ended, and the crowd began to move toward the dining area. Guests chatted, laughed, and mingled. Nira's parents approached her, offering smiles and gentle words of encouragement. She nodded politely, though her mind was still focused on the human who had watched her quietly. As she prepared to leave the stage, she felt a small hand gently brush against hers. She looked down and saw Tom smiling softly. "You did well," he said simply. His voice was calm, not loud or commanding, but it carried a warmth that made her heart skip a beat. Nira did not know what to say. She had expected compliments from her parents or the dignitaries, not from someone who was not part of her world. She nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. For the first time that day, she felt that maybe she could belong somewhere, even if it was only with this human who had seen her courage without words. The grand hall was still bustling with activity, but Nira felt a quiet space around her, a small bubble of calm and connection. She realized that perhaps being a princess did not always mean being alone. Perhaps there could be someone who would notice her not as a symbol, but as Nira, the shy, thoughtful, and gentle princess who wanted only to be seen. And in that moment, a small spark of hope ignited in her heart. The day after the ceremony, Princess Nira awoke with a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. Her room in the palace was quiet, the soft morning light filtering through tall, crystal-clear windows. She looked at the gift she had presented yesterday, the delicate crystal sculpture, and for a moment she thought of the human who had watched her quietly in the grand hall. Tom's calm presence lingered in her mind. She did not know much about him, not even where he came from, but somehow she felt a strange trust toward him. After breakfast, the palace corridors were filled with visitors from many worlds. Nira walked carefully, her small steps echoing lightly on the polished floor. She held a book close to her chest, one of her favorite books about the stars. Reading was something that gave her comfort, a small escape from the attention and expectation that came with her title. She moved quietly, hoping to avoid the notice of the busy diplomats and officials. Tom, meanwhile, moved through the palace with calm observation. He had received permission to explore the palace and learn about the culture of Virelia. Unlike the other visitors, he did not rush or push his way into conversations. He did not feel the need to impress anyone. His attention, as always, remained on Princess Nira. He had noticed her hesitation, her quiet strength, and the gentleness that she carried even in a room full of strangers. He wondered how someone so small and shy could have such a strong presence, a presence that mattered more than any loud gesture or speech. Later in the morning, a gathering was arranged in one of the palace gardens. The gardens were magnificent, filled with plants that glowed softly under the alien sun. Some plants seemed to float above the ground, while others had leaves that shimmered in colors unknown to human eyes. Guests moved among the garden paths, enjoying the beauty of the flora. While discussing alliances, science, and art, Nira wandered along a quiet path, seeking a place where she could be alone for a few moments. She loved these gardens because they felt peaceful, and the soft sounds of alien birds and the gentle rustling of leaves helped her calm her thoughts. Tom saw her immediately. She was walking slowly, her gaze on the ground, her hands fidgeting slightly as she tried to steady herself. He noticed the way her steps were careful, as if she were afraid of making a mistake. He felt an urge to help her, not because she needed saving, but because he understood how lonely it must feel to be ignored in a world full of attention and noise. As Nira turned a corner, she stumbled slightly. Her foot caught on a small stone embedded in the path, and she nearly fell. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The guests nearby did not notice. They were too busy speaking to each other or admiring the glowing flowers. Nira's heart pounded, and she felt a rush of embarrassment. Her cheeks turned a faint shade of pink, and she struggled to regain her balance. Then, without hesitation, Tom stepped forward. His hand reached out gently, and he held hers firmly, guiding her back to stability. Nira looked up, startled, and met his eyes. They were calm, steady, and full of understanding. For the first time in the palace, she did not feel judged or laughed at. She felt seen. "Are you all right?" Tom asked softly. His voice was warm, and it carried no hint of mockery or surprise. It was simply kind and sincere. Nira nodded, her fingers still resting in his. She could not speak immediately. The gesture had caught her off guard, but it also made her heart feel lighter. She had never expected a human, a visitor from another world, to extend such care toward her. Most people either ignored her or treated her as a symbol, not as a person. Tom treated her as a person. "Yes," she whispered finally, her voice barely audible. "Thank you," Tom smiled gently. "You did not fall far. I am glad I was here to help." There was a silence, comfortable and quiet, as they stood together among the glowing flowers. The sunlight filtered through the leaves above, casting dappled patterns on the ground. For Nira, the moment felt like a small miracle. She had been invisible for so long, overlooked by everyone. Yet here was someone who had noticed her, and without judgment. "Do you often walk here alone?" Tom asked. Nira hesitated. "Sometimes. It is quieter than the halls. I like to watch the plants and the stars." She looked down at her hands. "Most people do not notice things like that. I notice," Tom said simply. "I like to notice small things. They tell stories that words cannot always explain." Nira felt a warmth spread through her chest. His words were simple, yet they carried meaning. She realized that she had spent so much time trying to meet expectations, trying to appear as a perfect princess, that she had forgotten the joy of simply noticing and being noticed. They walked together along the path, keeping a small distance but close enough to share the quiet moment. Tom did not try to dominate the conversation, nor did he force questions. He let Nira speak, and when she was quiet, he respected her silence. They passed glowing shrubs, flowers that sang softly when the wind moved through them, and small pools of water that reflected the alien sky like mirrors. Nira began to tell him about the stars she had seen through her telescope. She spoke slowly, her voice gaining confidence with each word. She told him about the colors, the shapes, and the patterns she loved. Tom listened attentively, asking gentle questions, encouraging her to describe what she saw in her own words. He did not interrupt, and he did not try to correct her. He simply listened, and that made her feel respected. "You have a good eye," Tom said finally. "You notice things others might miss." Nira smiled softly, her shyness melting slightly. "I like noticing things. It makes the world feel bigger and yet more personal." Tom nodded. "I understand. That is why I noticed you yesterday. Even in a room full of people, you stood out. Quietly but clearly, her heart fluttered. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She had always been afraid that her quiet nature was a weakness, but Tom made her feel that it was a strength. She could be herself and it could matter. They continued to walk until they reached a small bench beneath a glowing tree. Its branches curved downward like gentle arms and soft petals drifted slowly to the ground. Nira sat, still holding Tom's hand lightly while he remained standing, giving her the space to rest. "I want to show you something," Nira said after a moment. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small hand-drawn map of the palace gardens. "I like to draw maps of the places I explore. It helps me remember them." Tom leaned closer to look. The map was simple but carefully drawn, showing paths, glowing plants, and the location of quiet corners. "This is wonderful," he said. "It shows your perspective. You notice things in a way no one else would." Nira felt her cheeks warm. "I have always liked seeing the details. Most people just rush through and miss them. I do not rush," Tom replied, "and I do not miss." They shared a quiet laugh, and Nira realized how easy it was to speak with him. She did not need to hide her thoughts or feelings. She could be herself, and he would understand. As the afternoon light shifted and shadows lengthened, they walked together back toward the palace. Tom continued to talk gently, asking her about her favorite things, about her dreams, and about what she liked to do when she was alone. Nira spoke freely, telling him about her love for painting, for watching sunsets, and for imagining what lay beyond the stars. Tom listened, offering encouragement and curiosity, never judgment. Each word, each small smile, strengthened the bond forming between them. Nira realized that this was the first time she had ever felt truly seen by someone outside her family. It was not a fleeting feeling, but a real connection that made her heart lighter and her thoughts clearer. When they reached the palace entrance, they paused. Nira looked up at the tall doors, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Tom turned to her and offered his hand again. "Shall we go back together?" he asked. Nira hesitated for a moment, then took his hand. The touch was firm but gentle, comforting and steady. She felt a sense of courage she had never known. Together they walked back into the bustling palace, but this time Nira felt different. She was not invisible. She had someone who believed in her, someone who saw her for who she truly was, and, in that simple gesture, holding hands with a human who understood her, Nira felt the first spark of hope for a future where she could be herself and where her quiet strength could shine. Days passed after the first meeting in the palace gardens. Princess Nira found herself thinking often about Tom. She could not explain why, but his calm presence made her feel more confident and less alone. Even though she remained shy around most of the other guests, she began looking forward to the moments she could spend with him. Tom, too, found the time with Nira meaningful. Unlike the bustling diplomats and dignitaries, Nira did not care for appearances or politics. She spoke honestly, and he felt a rare connection to someone whose thoughts were pure and simple. For him, this was not about impressing a princess or gaining favor. It was about understanding her, sharing ideas, and discovering a mind that saw the world differently. One afternoon, Nira invited Tom to the palace library. The library was enormous, a vast hall filled with shelves that reached toward the high, glowing ceiling. Each shelf held books from many planets with stories written in countless languages. The smell of old pages and glowing ink filled the air, creating a quiet magic that Nira loved. "I come here to read when I need quiet," Nira said softly, leading Tom down a narrow aisle. "Most people do not notice the library. They think it is boring, but I like it. It is full of stories and knowledge." Tom followed her carefully, observing the glowing script on the alien books. He was amazed at how much Nira understood. Her fingers traced the pages lightly, her eyes shining with curiosity. "You know these stories?" he asked. "I try to," Nira replied. "Some are hard to understand, but I like learning about other worlds. It helps me imagine things differently." Tom nodded. "That is a good way to think. Stories show us ideas we might never see otherwise. They teach us about courage, kindness, and wisdom." They spent hours exploring the shelves together. Nira showed him books about alien history, art, and science. She explained concepts with careful thought, and Tom listened with patience and genuine interest. They discussed their favorite passages, compared ideas, and even laughed softly at the strange creatures described in some of the stories. As they shared ideas, Nira realized that talking with Tom was effortless. She did not have to hide her shyness, and she did not have to act like someone she was not. She felt safe to ask questions, share opinions, and even make mistakes. Tom never judged her. He simply listened, encouraged, and responded thoughtfully. When the afternoon sunlight shifted and the library glowed in soft golden light, Nira closed a book and looked at Tom. "I like spending time with you," she admitted quietly. "Most people do not try to understand me. They only see a princess, not me." Tom smiled gently. "I see you, Nira. Not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as you. That is all I want." Her heart warmed at his words. For the first time, she felt that someone truly valued her for who she was. She realized that being shy was not a weakness. It allowed her to notice small details, to think carefully, and to feel deeply. And someone like Tom could see the strength in that. In the following days, their friendship grew. They met in secret corners of the palace gardens, explored the library together, and sometimes walked along quiet paths outside the palace walls. Tom shared stories about Earth, describing mountains, oceans, forests, and cities full of people who, like him, noticed the small wonders of life. Nira listened with fascination, imagining each place as vividly as if she had seen it herself. Nira also shared her love for painting. She had small canvases hidden in her room, filled with images of alien landscapes, glowing plants, and distant stars. One afternoon, she brought some of her paintings to the garden and showed them to Tom. "These are beautiful," Tom said, studying each painting carefully. "You see the world in a special way. You capture things others might miss." Nira blushed lightly. "I paint what I feel. Sometimes it is the plants, sometimes the stars. Sometimes it is how the world makes me feel." Tom nodded. "It is more than beautiful. It shows your heart. That is rare." Encouraged by his words, Nira began to paint more openly. She painted under the soft sunlight of the gardens, her brushes moving with care and precision. Tom stayed nearby, offering quiet advice, sharing stories about colors on Earth, and sometimes simply watching her work. The companionship between them was gentle, warm, and unspoken, yet it created a bond stronger than any words could express. One evening, as the sun set over the palace, Nira and Tom found themselves on a terrace overlooking the city of Varelia. The sky was filled with colors she had never seen before, blending shades of purple, gold, and silver. The city below glowed with lights that reflected off the water and the crystal buildings. "It is beautiful," Nira whispered, her eyes wide. Tom smiled. "It is. But sometimes the most beautiful things are the small moments we share. Like this here now." Nira turned to him, a small smile forming on her lips. "You make the world feel less lonely." "And you make it feel worth noticing," Tom replied softly. As days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. Nira began to feel more confident, not because she wanted attention, but because she knew someone believed in her. She walked taller in the halls, spoke more freely in private meetings, and even offered her opinions during discussions with the council. Her shyness did not disappear, but it became a strength. She could observe carefully, think deeply, and act with thoughtfulness. Tom continued to encourage her. He helped her see that courage was not only about loud actions or bold speeches. Sometimes courage was standing quietly, noticing the truth and acting with care. Sometimes it was helping someone up when they stumble, even when no one else sees it. Their shared moments were not always serious. They laughed together at small mistakes, played quiet games in the palace gardens, and sometimes sat in silence, simply enjoying each other's presence. Nira learned to trust her instincts, and Tom learned to understand the subtle signs of her thoughts and feelings. One afternoon, a small incident tested their growing bond. Nira had been walking along a narrow garden path when a group of diplomats passed by. They were discussing trade agreements loudly, barely noticing her presence. One of them accidentally stepped too close, causing a small branch to fall toward Nira. She reacted quickly but unsteadily, and her balance faltered. Before she could fall, Tom was there. He extended his hand just as he had the first day and held hers firmly. Nira felt the strength in his grip and the calmness in his eyes. She regained her balance, her heart pounding, but this time she smiled rather than trembling. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger than before. "You are welcome," Tom replied. "I will always be here if you need me." The incident was small, but it reminded Nira that courage and support could come from unexpected places. It reminded her that even in a world filled with noise and distraction, someone could see her clearly and care. In the quiet that followed, they sat together under a glowing tree. Nira began to share her hopes for the future. She spoke of exploring the stars, learning about other planets, and creating art that could inspire others. Tom listened carefully, encouraging her to dream boldly, even if her shyness made her hesitant. "You have a bright mind," he said, "and a kind heart. If you follow your instincts, you can do amazing things." Nira felt a deep gratitude. For the first time, she believed in herself. Not because of her title, but because someone had shown her that she could. She realized that friendship, understanding, and trust could give her courage greater than any formal training or royal command. As the evening drew near, they walked back toward the palace, hands brushing occasionally. Nira's confidence grew with each step, not in arrogance, but in quiet assurance. She was learning that her voice mattered, her thoughts mattered, and that kindness and courage could make a difference. Tom continued to be her companion, guiding without controlling, supporting without overwhelming. Together they discovered that even small shared moments could change the way one saw the world. Nira began to feel that the palace, the gardens, and even the vast, glowing halls of Veralia were not just places of expectation, but places where she could grow, explore, and shine in her own way. And in every quiet gesture, every shared laugh, and every moment of understanding, Nira felt the bond between her and Tom growing stronger. She realized that courage was not only about facing grand challenges, but also about trusting someone enough to let them in, and letting herself be seen for who she truly was. In the weeks that followed, Nira and Tom continued to share these moments, each day building trust, respect, and a quiet joy. Nira was no longer invisible. She had someone who saw her clearly, who believed in her, and who made her feel that even a shy princess could have a bright and important place in the universe. The days in the Veralia Palace had grown peaceful and bright for Princess Nira. Her quiet courage had begun to bloom, and people started to notice small changes in her. She spoke more clearly during meetings. She walked with more confidence, and there was a new light in her eyes that had not been there before. Many in the palace whispered that the shy princess had changed, but they did not understand how. Only Tom knew the truth. He knew that Nira's confidence came not from power or training, but from the simple strength of being understood and believed in. The council meetings had grown busy in recent weeks. The kingdom of Veralia was discussing new trade routes and defense agreements with other planets. Delegates from many species had arrived, each one bringing their own plans, ideas, and demands. Among them was a diplomat named Ryler from the neighboring planet Drethan. Ryler was known for his intelligence and his pride. He was tall, with shimmering blue skin and golden eyes that reflected light like fire. He often spoke loudly and sharply, and he believed that strength meant power and dominance. From the moment Ryler arrived, he noticed Nira's quiet nature. To him, her calm and soft-spoken manner seemed weak. He thought she was too gentle to lead and too shy to be taken seriously. When he spoke in meetings, he often interrupted her or ignored her words completely. Nira noticed his behavior but tried to stay polite. Tom, however, saw everything. One morning, the Grand Council chamber was filled with voices as the delegates discussed a new agreement. The air was tense, and the tall windows shimmered with sunlight. King Toran and Queen Celia sat at the head of the long table, listening carefully. Nira sat beside them, her hands resting lightly on the table, while Tom stood quietly near the entrance, observing. Ryler was speaking loudly about Drethan's plans. "We offer protection," he said proudly, "and in return we ask for full control of the trade routes through your system. It is fair, is it not?" The room fell silent for a moment. Nira looked up, her thoughts racing. She knew that giving Drethan control of the trade routes would weaken Verelia's independence. Her father hesitated, clearly considering his words. Finally, Nira spoke, her voice calm but steady. "Ambassador Ryler, your offer is generous, but it would limit our ability to support smaller planets that depend on our open trade routes. If we give control to one planet, others may suffer." Her words were polite, logical, and fair. But Ryler's eyes narrowed, and he let out a sharp laugh. "You speak of trade and fairness, Princess," he said in a mocking tone. "But what does a sheltered royal know of such matters? You have never seen the outer systems or managed fleets. You live in comfort while others work for survival. The word stung, and the room grew quiet. Nira's face flushed slightly, but she kept her gaze steady. Tom's hands tightened at his sides as he watched. He could see that Nira was hurt, yet she did not look away. "My comfort does not blind me," she replied softly. "It helps me see the value of peace. Control brings fear, but fairness brings trust. Without trust, no agreement can last." Her words carried quiet power, but Ryler only smirked. "Such poetic talk," he said, turning to the other delegates. "But the universe is not built on soft words. It is built on strength." Tom stepped forward slightly, his calm voice breaking the silence. "Sometimes strength is not in power, but in restraint," he said. "Sometimes real strength is knowing when to listen instead of forcing your will." The delegates turned toward him in surprise. Ryler looked annoyed. "And who are you, human?" he demanded. "I am only an observer," Tom replied. "But even an observer can see when wisdom is being ignored." The room murmured softly as Tom's words spread through the crowd. Ryler frowned, clearly displeased. But King Torin raised his hand. "That will be enough for now," the king said firmly. "We will continue this discussion later." As the meeting ended, Nira rose slowly. Her heart was still beating fast, but she felt proud. She had spoken her truth despite the challenge, and Tom's quiet support had helped her stand tall. As they left the room, she glanced at him and smiled faintly. "Thank you," she whispered. "You did not need my help," Tom replied with a small smile. "You spoke with courage and wisdom. You showed them strength in a new way." Later that day, the gardens were quiet again. Nira and Tom walked together under the glowing trees. The sunlight reflected softly off the crystal petals, filling the air with color. But beneath the peace, Nira's mind was still restless. "Ryler's words still echo in my head," she admitted. "He made me feel small again, as if all my thoughts mean nothing." Tom shook his head. "He only sees strength in force. But you have something far greater. You see strength in kindness and patience and understanding. That is what true leaders have." Nira looked thoughtful. "I want to believe that," she said. "But sometimes I feel that no one listens. They only see me as the quiet one." "They will listen," Tom said firmly, "because your actions will show them. You do not have to shout to be heard. You just have to be true to yourself." Nira smiled softly. His words comforted her, as they always did. The following day, another council meeting was arranged. This one was more formal, with even more guests from other planets. Tensions were high, and many feared that Ryler would push his demands again. Nira prepared herself carefully, repeating her notes and calming her breath. Tom encouraged her gently, reminding her to stay confident and trust her instincts. When the meeting began, Ryler stood once again to speak. He presented new plans, this time suggesting that Drethon's fleets should patrol Virelia's skies for security. The idea shocked the council. It was clear that he wanted control, not partnership. Before anyone else could respond, Nira rose from her seat. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the chamber clearly. "Ambassador Ryler," she said, "your concern for our safety is noted, but your proposal crosses the line of respect between our worlds. Virelia does not need protection through control. We see cooperation built on equality." Ryler's eyes flashed with anger. "You refuse our help?" "We refuse to surrender our freedom," Nira replied steadily. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for Ryler's response. His pride would not allow him to accept defeat easily. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You speak boldly for someone with so little experience. Perhaps you should let those who understand power decide." Before Nira could respond, Tom stepped forward again. His tone remained calm but carried quiet authority. "And perhaps those who understand power should learn what wisdom looks like. The princess may be young, but she speaks for peace. Power without peace destroys. Peace with strength builds." Ryler turned toward Tom, his golden eyes glowing with anger, but the other delegates began to whisper among themselves. They had heard the truth in Tom's words. King Torin nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. When the meeting ended, the decision was clear. The council voted against Ryler's proposal, and instead supported a plan that Nira had quietly suggested earlier. A plan that encouraged shared roots, equal trade and protection through cooperation rather than control. Ryler, humiliated, left the chamber without another word. As the delegates began to leave, many looked at Nira with new respect. For the first time, they saw not just a quiet princess but a wise leader. Outside on the palace balcony, Nira stood with Tom. The sky was glowing with evening colors. She turned to him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I was afraid," she admitted. "I thought my voice would be lost among theirs," Tom smiled. "It was never lost. It only needed to be heard. You found your voice and you used it well." Nira looked out over the city. "I could not have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Tom said softly. "But I'm glad I was here to see it." They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the lights flicker across the horizon. Nira felt peace in her heart. She had faced her first great challenge and stood tall. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting with strength even when fear tried to hold her back. That night, as she looked out from her window, Nira thought about everything that had happened. She remembered Ryler's harsh words, her trembling voice, and Tom's steady gaze. She realized that the true lesson of strength came from understanding, not domination. She had learned that humans, though from a small world far from her own, carried wisdom that even the most powerful aliens could learn from. For the first time, Princess Nira did not feel like the shy girl in the corner of the grand hall. She felt like someone who could stand among leaders and be heard, and beside her she knew there was a human who had shown her that even quiet strength could change the way worlds understood power. The sun rose slowly over the crystal towers of Virelia, spreading soft gold light across the palace courtyards. The morning breeze carried the scent of silver flowers that grew near the walls. The planet seemed calm and bright, but inside the great hall of the palace everyone was preparing for one of the most important events in many years. After the council meetings and the challenge with Ryler, everything had changed. The story of Princess Nira's calm courage had spread through every corner of the city. People spoke about the day she stood up to the powerful ambassador and protected Virelia's freedom without anger or fear. Her words had touched hearts across different worlds, and for the first time, the other planets saw Virelia not as a quiet world but as a strong and wise one. Nira, however, still felt humble. She did not see herself as a hero. She remembered every moment of that day, the quick beat of her heart, and the fear that had almost stopped her from speaking. She remembered Tom's steady eyes giving her silent strength. She knew that courage was not about pride but about doing what was right, even when afraid. That morning, Queen Celia came to Nira's room. The queen's silver robe shimmered as she walked in. She smiled. At her daughter, "The hall is ready," she said. "The leaders from 5 planets are here. They wish to honor you for your wisdom and for showing a new path of peace." Nira looked surprised. "Honor me, mother, I only spoke what I believed." "That is why you deserve it," the queen replied gently. "Many can speak when the crowd agrees, but only a few can speak when no one will stand beside them. You showed everyone that quiet words can be stronger than loud ones." Nira smiled shyly. "Tom helped me. He believed in me when I doubted myself." The queen nodded. "He saw your strength before anyone else did. Humans have a strange but wonderful way of seeing what others miss." When Nira entered the grand hall later that day, the entire room stood in silence, then applause filled the air. The delegates from many planets were present. The long glass windows reflected the bright sky, and banners of every color hung from the ceiling. King Torrhen stood at the front beside Queen Celia, waiting for his daughter. Tom was also there, standing quietly near the side, wearing a simple, formal jacket. He did not like attention, but everyone knew he was the human who had spoken bravely during the meeting. He had become a quiet symbol of honor among both Virelians and visitors. The king raised his hand and the hall grew silent. "Today we celebrate wisdom over pride, peace over power," he said. "Our daughter, Princess Nira, faced challenge and disrespect. Yet she answered not with anger, but with truth and respect. Because of her, the planets of our sector now speak together with trust, not fear." He turned to Nira and placed a shining pendant of crystal light around her neck. "You have reminded us that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly and still moves the stars." The hall echoed with applause. Nira felt her heart fill with warmth, but her eyes searched the crowd until they found Tom. He stood quietly smiling, not proud, but happy. She smiled back, knowing that his friendship had made her stronger. After the ceremony, many leaders came to speak with her. They asked about her thoughts on peace and cooperation. Some invited her to visit their worlds. Others offered new trade routes under shared control. Her calm answers and kind tone impressed everyone. It was clear that a new chapter had begun for Virelia. Later that evening, as the sky turned violet, Nira walked out to the palace balcony. She wanted to breathe the quiet air again. Tom joined her, after a while carrying 2 cups of the sweet glowing drink that Virelians enjoyed. He handed one to her and smiled. "You were amazing today." Nira laughed softly. "I was nervous the whole time. That makes it even better," Tom said. "Real. Courage always comes with fear. If there is no fear, there is no need for courage." She nodded, watching the stars. "I still cannot believe they honored me for speaking my mind. I never imagined I would have that kind of voice." "You always had it," Tom said. "You just needed to hear it yourself." They stood in silence for a while. The soft lights of the city shimmered below them. Ships moved slowly across the night sky, carrying messages and goods between planets. Nira thought about how much had changed since she first met Tom. She had been a quiet princess hidden behind palace walls, while he had been a visitor from a faraway world. Together they had changed how 2 civilizations saw each other. "Tom," she said after a moment, "you have shown my people something they never understood before. Humans are small compared to most of the galaxy, but you carry something rare. You care more about what is right than about what is easy." Tom looked thoughtful. "Maybe that is what humans are best at," he said. "We fall, we learn, we try again. We don't have great power or perfect knowledge, but we have hope, and hope is a strong thing." Nira smiled. "It is. I have learned that from you." Just then, the sound of soft footsteps came from behind Queen Celia, and King Torin approached smiling. The Queen placed her hand on Nira's shoulder. "We have decided to start a new program of cooperation between our worlds," she said. "We want humans and Virelians to learn from each other, not as rulers and guests, but as equals." Tom's eyes widened slightly. "That is wonderful." The king nodded. "And we would like you both to lead the first delegation together. You have shown what trust between our kinds can achieve." Nira looked surprised. "Me? Who better?" The king said. "You earned their respect with your words. Now show them what lasting friendship can build." Nira glanced at Tom. He smiled and said quietly, "It would be an honor." Over. The next few weeks preparations began for the mission. Nira and Tom worked side by side, planning visits to nearby planets. They met with scientists, traders, and young students from both species. Everyone wanted to see the princess and the human who had changed history. The 2 became symbols of hope that peace could grow from understanding. During one of the planning nights, Nira sat in the library surrounded by glowing books and star maps. Tom walked in carrying a list of schedules. "You are still awake," he said, smiling. "There is so much to prepare," she replied, "but it feels exciting, not heavy. You enjoy this now," he said. "A few months ago, you would have hidden from such meetings." She laughed softly. "I suppose I have learned from a certain human that even small steps can lead to great changes." Tom smiled. "And I have learned from a certain princess that even quiet voices can echo through galaxies." When the day of departure arrived, the spaceport was filled with crowds waving flags of both planets. The great silver ship stood ready, its wings reflecting sunlight. Nira wore her royal uniform, simple yet elegant. Tom stood beside her, dressed in the colors of both worlds, blue and white. The king and queen gave their blessings, and the crowd cheered as they boarded the ship. As the engines hummed to life, Nira looked out of the window, watching the palace grow smaller. She turned to Tom. "Do you think they will remember this day?" Tom nodded. "They will remember that it started with one moment, one human hand reaching out to one alien princess." Nira smiled. "And that small moment changed everything." As the ship rose into the sky, leaving a trail of light behind, Nira felt peace in her heart. She knew the path ahead would bring new challenges and new lessons, but she was ready. She was no longer the shy princess who hid behind silence. She was a voice of unity and hope, and beside her stood a friend who had shown her that humanity could shine even among the stars. Together they looked out at the endless horizon of space. The stars stretched before them like a sea of light, reminding them that even in the vastness of the universe, small acts of kindness could shape destinies. And so, began a new journey for both human and Varelian. A journey not of conquest or pride, but of friendship, understanding, and the belief that when hearts from different worlds meet, even the coldest distance between stars can become warm with light.